to George about his sound design and original music that he's written for many City Lights shows. We're going to focus on 3 shows: The Language Archive, Build, and Eurydice, 3 of our favorite shows. And we'll also kind of jump around and talk about other stuff too. So I've got some video slideshows for each one of those shows. But before we start, maybe George, you could just talk a little bit about how you got involved in sound design. I think people can picture what a music composer does, but maybe a sound designer, they may not know exactly. Tell us a little bit how you got into it and what life is like as a sound designer.
What life is like as a sound designer? Well, it's pretty interesting. I got into it because I started from a music background slightly before I got involved in theater. And so I guess the short version is when I was at Foothill and we did some one acts there, and we all sort of self-produced. People helped with costumes and students helped with costumes and lights and all the tech stuff and the set and things like that. I was like, hey, I want to do the music stuff or everything that you hear. And I was like, wow, that's a thing. And you can pick music for a show, and you can write music for a show, and you can be in charge of the sound design and be in charge of everything that everybody hears in that theatrical experience, and from phone rings to underscoring, battle scenes and things like that. So I got involved in there, and then I got involved with City Lights at the same few years later, and it just became. I just kept growing as a designer in that way, and they sort of let me find my way, and I just have been doing it ever since. I've done every show since 2011, and I've done every show since 2011, so it was like over 50 in a row, 55 in a row probably, and then the pandemic hit, and then I hit my first break. So maybe I needed it, but maybe this is the bad reason why, but yeah. So I got in through school and my previous music background.
That's right. So you designed more than 50 shows at City Lights and also won Theater Bay Area Awards for Outstanding Sound Design for 4 shows there.
Yeah. Been lucky enough to get those guys.
Yeah. And I also didn't mention, but should have, that on the acting side, George made his feature film debut earlier this year in Disney Pixar's Onward. So,
yeah. Check
cool.
it out. Disney Plus.
Yeah. Great. Well, so I'm going to jump on over to our first show that we're going to talk about today, which is The Language Archive. The production was 2014. Language Archive was written by Julia Cho. Production was directed by Virginia Drake. It's a really beautiful play. It centers on a linguist named George. George, right? Yes. The linguist is named George. For a second, I thought I was mixing their names.
Correct.
The character is also named George. He's a linguist, and he is working to try to save endangered languages. And yet he has a lot of trouble communicating in his personal life. So there's that.
But he's fine now because Jeff Bracco is skiing on a lake somewhere. So
right, Jeff Bracco played him, one of our regulars. And also, in his language lab are an older woman and a man who are a couple who are the last speakers of a language called Eloan, but they are in a horrible fight and they're refusing to speak to each other, which makes it a little bit difficult for the linguist. So I'm going to share my screen right now and play you some music from the Language Archive. Gorgeous. Did that play okay for you? Everyone heard that just fine?
Sounded good. Looked good. Yeah.
Good. It is a beautiful piece of music. Well, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about when we hear this music during the show and what kind of emotions and things are happening when we hear this music?
Well, it's our main theme of the show. It comes in the top of the show and in between certain scene changes, and there's also variations on that main theme um, in between scenes as well. Um, it was sort of our through line through it, so there was a variation of that. And when I open the QLab session, I can show you some breakdowns of that. But when I showed it to Ginger, it's like, hey, I got this theme. She's like, oh, that's great. She's like, it's got this European art film kind of quality, and she liked it. And I think it's, I really, I wanted to keep it simple and sort of introspective, and has a gentle quality to it and a very small scale quality about it as well, because it's very much a play about the characters and their journeys as opposed to the big circumstances around them. I really wanted to make it feel sort of small and very intimate and thoughtful and kind of longing and a bit sad at times. um, yeah.
That's beautiful. Now, were you familiar with the play before you started writing? How does the process go that you actually start creating sound design and original music for a particular
I was
play?
familiar with this play. I did see another production of it. That didn't really play into how I went about it. But how I usually go about a play is I get the play and I read it by myself, and I read it very fast. I read it faster than I would if I were reading it as an actor, potentially to go in as an acting audition, because I read it fast. I don't necessarily concern myself with who's reading, who says exactly every single line. I don't really track the character arcs at the initial read through. So I read it very fast. I read all the stage directions. I circle anything that says doorbell, phone ring, things like that. Those are those sort of the nuts and bolts things that you have to remember. And those are really the easiest part of sound design. If the doorbell rings, you just got to make the doorbell happen. It's what you do outside of it that gets more complicated. So I read it and I write it and I plot it, and I'll show you once I get to the screen sharing part what my plot looks like. I write down a page number and I leave a column for the cue number, and I say what the sound is and what its purpose is and any notes in the margin. I'll show you that. It's like an Excel sheet. So I read that and I plot it, and then I attend every production meeting, either virtually or in person. And those production meetings are mainly problem solving, right? Sound will talk about what my initial instincts are. Lights will talk about their initial instincts, and then out of that, all the designers will usually have a one-on-one with the director, and they'll talk about, hey, I'm thinking about going in this direction. The director will say the same thing, and you meet and compromise, and then you just show each other sort of things offline, and then update all that in production meetings as they happen. After that, we watch what something's called, we watch something called a designer run through. So it's a run through for all the designers. It's wherever they're at in the process. It's usually, it's not perfect. It's just wherever it's at. And we're looking at it not from a performance standpoint. We're looking at it as in how our individual departments look at it. Our individual design aspects affect the play. I bring in or send in cues as needed. If anything's actor driven, I'm trying to think of a good example, but if an actor has to sing something, or a group of people have to sing something, some companies will hire a music director to come in and teach that music stuff. But because I have a music background, I can come in early and do that as well. If something needs to be timed to a specific sequence, I will work on that as well. Anything actor driven that affects their rehearsal process, and that can't be learned, like that, I try to send it in as early as possible to bring in anything actor driven, anything that affects sort of the mechanics of the play. You got to send that stuff in early. And then you prepare for tech, which means you've had meetings with the director, and you've had meetings with the rest of the production staff, and you get all your cues in order, and you put it in the software, and you have a process called paper tech, which is adding all those cues, light cues, sound cues, projection cues, into the book of the stage manager so that they know when to call things and when they're happening and how they're happening. And then it's a slow process after that, and sort of moving in, moment by moment, technically, on what the show looks like. And then after that, you have X amount of chances to see the show and make notes and make choices like that. And then you have opening night.
It's not just writing the beautiful melody. It's a lot of hours, a lot of teamwork. Yeah.
Collaboration too, a ton.
Of course. You mentioned software, what's it
QLab.
called? QLab.
Yeah.
Why don't you give us a demonstration of
Let me show you
the language archive.
So this is, if everybody can see it, this is a software called QLab. This is my sort of language archive thing that I built for this specific thing. I don't remember what I did for the actual show. That's on another computer somewhere else. So this is called QLab. There's a free version of it. Online. We have a slightly more complicated version of it at the theater with more channels and more bells and whistles and things like that. But it goes basically something like, you take, so here's my theme. I would write a theme and I would make it, I'll delete that. Let's say I'll call this cue number 1. And I wrote it in a specific software called Pro Tools, where I have all my musical stuff. And I export it and I bring it into QLab as a stereo file here. And I press a space bar. That's what we get. And then I have a cue that says fade and stop, and that can be called whenever that needs to happen. I can also, make that happen at a very specific time, or the stage manager will call that out. I hit the button to call the music out whenever it needs to happen, usually with lights at the same time. So that's sort of the basic way of how this version of how QLab works, and adding sound and sort of a main theme.
What's Dreamy Scene Change?
Oh, Dreamy Scene Change. We'll check out Dreamy Scene Change. This was sort of, it's not really based on a theme, but sort of tangentially related. This was a very theatrical moment where the actor playing George, we had this very sort of theatrical, big kind of dreamy scene change, if you will. and Ginger was asking him to do a lot of this stuff, and he was working the rehearsal without a lot of sort of tech help, music help. So I needed to sort of support his big actions in this sequence.
This is where he was sort of confused.
Yes. Yeah. That's Dreamy Scene Change.
Beautiful.
One quick thing I wanted to show you that I will sort of talk about as we talk about these 3 shows, or so shows in general, is that if you go back to our main theme and you have the melody, that's the accompaniment, right? That's a sort of soloist, right? Dun, 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 dun. What I learned a long time ago through really trial and error is when I wanted to have sort of that same feel of that same piece, underscoring a piece of dialogue or a moment on stage, I found that it was conflicting, that it was so they were fighting with each other. And as a sound designer, as any designer, like the story has to come out first. We have to understand everybody's words first of all on a simple technical level, and then from a story standpoint, it has to come out in front of everything else. So we're all supporting that, and I can't stress that enough. No matter how many times I'm like, oh, you can't be like, oh, I want to hear my music, or I want to hear this, or I want to hear that. We're really all serving the story the entire time. So I wanted the same feel of that same thing happening. So I would find that the melody would conflict with what the actors are saying. So I found that if I just took the melody out, somebody can speak over it, and all of a sudden the actor becomes the melody. So similarly, so it gives you that feel of what the main theme is, but somebody can easily talk over it. And if our audio situation was better, I could sort of show you how that works. But sort of taking a trick that I use often, especially when I write the music, is taking the melody out, and the actor replaces all that, and they become the soloist, and the story comes forward, and you have that foundation of that theme that you've already built underneath it, supporting the story, which is the most important. Another way I can do that is another aspect of sound design is using sort of the tactile, actual sound aspects of that world. And another one we had, I have this sort of tape rewinding montage. The lead character has recorded all these languages for years and years and hours of tape, and he's going through all this stuff. So I added that on top of the theme with no melody. And again, that added room for the sound design to sit up top as a soloist. So. So yeah, those are a couple things. I don't know how detailed and stuff or how much in the weeds I got there, but
very cool.
That's
really interesting. I remember the tape montage. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, so we will move on to build.
Yeah. We're
going to switch gears. Ooh.
Yeah, I'll go back to that later, but there's an ending montage with all the I love you stuff. There's all this tearjerker. Good stuff. We can go back. Go back.
Well, we will definitely change mood here. We'll next talk about Build, which was from the next year, 2015. It's a play by Michael Golomko. Excuse me. And it's about two video game creators who are creating a sequel to their virally popular game. But one of the video game creators secretly has created an artificial intelligence who looks and sounds like his late wife. And that video game creator was played by George Psarras. So this is one of those shows. You did the sound design, you wrote music, and you acted in the show, in your spare time.
Back when I had that.
All right, I'm going to now play you something from Build. music from Build, which was directed by our executive artistic director, Lisa Millette. And of course, George was in the show. You played the character of Kip.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
How is it a different experience when you are not only creating the sound design, writing original music, but also inhabiting the character? I mean, do you basically just write all the best stuff to happen when your character's on stage?
No. I mean, no, I don't do that. No, I'm not that selfish, Becky.
How does the process change when you're in the show as well?
Well, I'm at more rehearsals, so logistically, I'm at a lot. I'm more involved in the process because I'm there all the time, talking with the director all the time. I'm solving character issues all the time. And in that particular play, we were 3 people, so it was a small cast, so I was there really all the time. It becomes, you become more immersed, and you're constantly thinking about the play and the scenes and the feel and the mood and a specific speech that needs to be underscored, or you want to have some kind of flavor underneath an entire scene. So yeah, it totally helps. It does help. And depending on how theatrical the show is, I will show up to more rehearsals, especially if I'm not in the play. I'll show up to more rehearsals just to really grasp what's going on with the language and what the conversations that the director is having with the actor and things like that. So yeah, the more involved you are, the more immersed you are. Now, like in terms of like being in the show and creating the sound and the music for that, that's just a matter of hours, man hours. And it does take more time, and I'm there longer than I would be if I am not in the show. And it's just, that's just a trade-off. But when you love what you do, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I do feel like, a little stretched sometimes, but it's okay.
You're involved, completely part of that show.
Yeah.
One thing that strikes me about the music is, of course, it all sounds very computer generated. It doesn't sound like a cello or a piano or something like that. And I've sometimes thought with computer generated sounding music, is it harder to find the human warmth? Is it harder to find the emotion? Does it feel colder, or does it not feel that way at all?
I think it doesn't. It doesn't feel different to me. I think because there's such a big palette of electronic music, and there are so many warm sounding synth pads, as we call them, or patches. And it really depends on what you want to portray in that moment. What do you want to feel here? But in the electronic world, because you don't see it, it's not an actual instrument. The options are endless, as opposed to using actual instruments that actually exist, because the soft synth stuff, the software synthesizer things, it's endless. So you want to portray warmth, you want to portray tension, if you want to portray angst, you want to portray movement, something to propel the story forward, which is something I always try to do, and you always have to do. As a designer, you really don't have many moments to lay back and sit in it. So yeah, the world is hugely colorful in that sort of synth land. And I'll show you some examples of sort of a softer, sort of intimate kind of feel that I have access to for those kinds of moments when needed.
And is that the kind of equipment that you usually use when you're composing and recording, or is your composing space full of guitars and mandolins and things like that?
No, because I'm a keyboard player inherently, so I have more. I'm not a guitar player. Because I'm a keyboard player, I have access to that sort of soft synth world, and from playing music all my life, it's a world I feel very comfortable in, and it's honestly it's an abyss of options. and thus emotions, you know what I mean, for each moment, and like the tools you use are your instruments, right? So the orchestration, the patches that I use, and it's just really about finding that kind of feel that you need in that particular moment.
And so what does your composing space look like? Is it It's you and keyboards.
It's not glamorous. It's not glamorous. It's kind of like I don't have the dream studio, not yet, but it's kind of when you're on a deadline, it's really just about getting the work done and sort of waiting and sipping a Mai Tai and waiting for inspiration to happen. This is really not happening because the clock is ticking. So
Yeah.
you set up a keyboard, set up a laptop, throw in a good pair of headphones or a good pair of studio speakers, and you just get to work. You find the inspiration through the story. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So you said there's something you'd like to demonstrate for us?
Yeah, I'll show you some build stuff. So something that I found and kind of cobbled together was the opening sequence of Build. And what you're about to see, this will go to a complete screen share, is the opening sequence of Build. And this was projected onto the actual set. So it was full encompassing into the set, and our projection and lighting designer built the video sequence that you're about to see, and everything that you hear, I added on top of.
Light, sound. This is how you and I communicate. You live in your world, I live in mine. And no matter what, we'll always be separated. All we'll ever have is light, sound. Because no matter what, between us, there will always be a screen.
I don't know how well that worked or how you guys saw that, but that was the opening sequence of Build. And a few other things here that I could show you is that I think this was another theme based on our main theme. So it was all about, talking about going back and finding variations of your main theme that sort of start the show. This was another version of that, I think with a melody on top of it. This is another one. And then going back to that sort of warm feel you're talking about, Becky, I think we added a sort of a warmthness under the AI would show up and she had a microphone and she would appear on stage. She would read her emails, and I think this is something that is underscoring all that. So again, that's just something very, very simple that doesn't take away. There's no melody on top of it. There's nothing busy about it. There's a lot of that's a lot of work that you have to do as a sound designer, is sort of create that sort of music bed underneath all that to support that theme. And that has a very, very warm quality to it, even though it's synthesized. So that's one example of that. Here's another thing I have. Oh, this is just the music with the melody. again, so that brings back the main theme, and what I would bring that in, like, just, I can't remember exactly where I put everything, but I'll tell you right off the bat that was probably early on in the process, in between the early scenes, because it pushes the story forward. It's got a momentum about it. It's got a rhythm to it, and it pushes it to the next scene. Now, usually around scene 3 or 4, when we figure out something new happens, new information has been dropped, there's been a change. So usually I try to go to something different there to help the audience feel that something is different. It's not just, we can't just go back to our main theme. We've learned who our characters are, we've learned what they want, and we've learned what their conflict is. But once we learn that one sort of plot twist, you got to change it up. You have to tell them how to feel, help them with that, and then something to push the story forward in a different direction than they had already been listened to. I don't remember what this is, but this is a different theme. Yeah, this is something we use like later on. Again, sort of coming from that same sort of synth world, but keeping it sort of that one is a lot more laid back. But there's a lot of different tricks to show where the story is going, and how do you sort of navigate that and sculpt that with the director. You know, we go back and forth a lot with the director, talking about, that feels a little same, that feels a little too heavy, that feels a little too light. You need to raise the stakes here. You need to up it a little bit. I mean, there's so many options with what you can have in between scenes. Scene changes take up most of my work, more than underscoring, more than anything else. So it's really about how we want to feel between scene to scene. And that really changes from how you want to feel from what it says on the page to what you're dealing with technically. If somebody has a long costume change there, and what I originally put there may have been the right feel, but it's too short, then I'm all about serving the sort of mechanics of we all are sort of subservient to the mechanics of theater. If somebody needs a longer time to change, or a set change needs to be moved, or things like that. And also the feel of the previous scene versus the feel on the scene you're going into. The easy way to do that, I'm sorry, easy, I don't mean easy in a good way, is you sort of pick how you feel at the end of this scene and how you want to feel at the beginning of this scene, and sort of blend them. That's really kind of the obvious way to do it, but it's a dissonant way of doing it. You have to really figure out what you have to kind of choose. What do you want the audience to feel more? Do you want us to feel what we just felt in the previous scene, or do you want us to just sort of take in what we got and like, oh, there's something else coming in now, pay attention? You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's a combination of both, but it's really about story. Which one is stronger? If there was a big plot point in the previous scene and you want to comment on that, then you want to go, ka-chunk in a music or a sound kind of way to really kind of land that big deal, right? And sort of let it wash over the audience in a storytelling way. If you want to just swipe it under the rug and just move on to the next scene because we're going to propel, there wasn't, that wasn't a life-changing scene, we just want to move it forward, then you want to push to the next scene. So stuff like that I take into consideration 90% of the time, because I'm dealing with scene changes.
Well, that's fascinating. That's a lot of the building blocks of theater I never thought about quite that way.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I especially love what you said before about how the actor can be like the melody, when you take the melody out of the music and you play the bottom part. Yeah, beautiful.
Always. And a great example of that, Becky, I listened to this podcast called Score, and they had on the composer of the Seinfeld theme on TV. What happened was, like, there was a lot of, I'll make this quick, there was a lot of music in the 80s. It had its own sort of musical flair with like saxophones and Family Ties, and it had this whole, it was a very melodic time for that kind of sort of television theme. And what he did was, he's like, they knew the makers of Seinfeld, they knew they wanted to open the episode with stand-up comedy from Jerry Seinfeld, right? Like every episode opens with. So he added percussion and he added a bass line. So you hear boom, 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 and then you have him talking over that. Jerry Seinfeld's comedy becomes the melody of the actual theme. He becomes the theme. And you get little brass stabs. Those are just sort of musical accompaniment. So he laid out this sort of musical groove, music bed, and Seinfeld became the melody. That's another sort of version of something that I heard recently.
Love it. Never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, on a completely unrelated note, let's go to the underworld. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Our third show that we're going to talk about tonight is Eurydice. Excuse me. I just got all cavelled thinking about Seinfeld. Eurydice, our production was 2019. Eurydice was written by Sarah Rule and directed by Lisa Millette. And it is based on the Greek myth of Orpheus, a grieving musician who loses his wife on their wedding day. He travels down to the underworld to try to retrieve his bride, Eurydice, and he is told he can, as long as he doesn't look back on the way up. And we had a little twist on our production, just a very small twist. We did a bilingual production. This was the brainchild of Lisa Millette, and it was English and American Sign Language. And so every role was double cast, and every role was by someone speaking and signing at the same time. And it was just an innovative, beautiful piece of theater. So I'm going to play the main theme, which features cellist Robin Snyder. And of course, it's written by George. Simply gorgeous. Gives me goosebumps every time. So beautiful. I'm just gonna like live in that music for a minute.
Well, we'll go back to it, so it's good.
Okay, so you probably had one of the most difficult jobs on the staff, because this was a production that Lisa envisioned and everyone created as being accessible to both hearing audiences and deaf and hard of hearing audiences. And the storytelling had to be accessible to all. And there you are, focusing on design and music. How do you approach that?
Well, Eurydice, the script by Sarah Rule, is very inherently theatrical. And I really didn't approach it any differently because of the sort of dual lingual quality of the whole thing. Because the people who are deaf or hard of hearing, they didn't fall on sound to sort of guide them the story. They fell onto, or they leaned on the lights telling them, or the interpreters. So a lot of like, fast forwarding to the end of the process, a lot of like what Tech Week and the rehearsals, the dress rehearsals were like, you know, our sign master was there, somebody who just looked at the people who were signing the play. They looked at, we were told like, I'm not getting this. I'm not exactly getting what we're feeling. She's like, what is playing here? What sound is playing here? They wouldn't hear all the detailed sort of uber theatrical sound design that I threw into the show. And it was all about sort of inclusivity. So she would have a conversation with Lisa, and all of a sudden the interpreter, we'd have to put more light on the interpreter. And now every character had an interpreter in this play. It's very differently conceived. So we'd put more light on the interpreter, or the lighting the lighting designer would adjust to give that feel on what the music was doing. So it really didn't fall on me. It fell on the interpreters and the lighting designer to enhance what the sound was that I was adding. So I really didn't take any different approach. I I took it, Eurydice is a very theatrical show. A very theatrical show. It's very poetic. So it's kind of like you can throw a bunch of different things at it, and whatever, there's probably a billion ways to sound design this show. There's a billion ways to costume this show. So I mean, I looked at it as like, this is one or two out of 6 shows that we do at City Lights that like is the theatrical beast. This is the one that's going to have 200 cues in it as opposed to 30 cues in it. So the approach wasn't that different. It was just about, I knew this was one of the big ones of the season that would have a huge sort of sound palette to it.
Sure. You did do something with the sense of touch, though. Didn't you add a lot of sort of reverb, or what did you, so that people could actually feel the sound?
Well, there are subwoofers. There are subwoofers under the seats. So yeah, there's definitely that rumble on things. On the specific cues that need that sort of theatricality. There are subwoofers under the center row of seats that you can feel. So you're right. In that way, they did feel it in some ways.
Yeah. And some of the signing too, some of the decisions that our director made with having people sign the stage directions. So people were actually seeing dripping water or water rushing through pipes.
Yes. So there wasn't a scene change. There wasn't a sound cue. There really wasn't a sound cue wasted. Everything was interpreted. Mm-hmm. Everything that you heard was signed in some way.
So this was just collaboration on a super high level. I mean, everything had to all tie together. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the main theme, this gorgeous main theme. Yeah. One thing that kind of stands out too is that we hired a cellist, Robin Snyder, who was the live cellist who played and you recorded. And that just added such a richness to it. And it's also, the main theme is heard several times during the play, and it's heard in different variations as it sometimes happens. Tell us about this gorgeous theme. How did it come to you? What is it saying in the play? How does it change?
I don't know how it came to me. I don't know. I just started messing around with things, and I knew I wanted it to be in a minor key, and I knew what sort of key is good for cellos, and I knew that I was thinking about hiring a solo cellist for this as opposed to it being synth, and I think we're going to move in that direction as we move on because the difference is just so, it's just so striking. And I will show you once we go into the QLab section what the original synth version sounded like and the final version sounded like. I think it's night and day. I don't know about the theme. I just sort of, it's instinctive. So I knew I wanted something longing. I knew I wanted something kind of sad. I knew I wanted something that was more legato and theatrical and beautiful. And it's just a matter of finding. It all started with, I guess my sort of into all this was Orpheus has a thing where he says, he sends a piece of music to Eurydice in the underworld, and he says symphony for 1,000 instruments or whatever he says. I can't remember, but I knew he had to conduct this thing. So again, from the practical level, the actor needed to know what this was. He was conducting a piece of music. So I knew early on I had to do that. So that was my window in. The main theme was was through whatever Orpheus was conducting in that moment. And after that, it was just about using a piece here and a piece that. And I really didn't get to use as many variations as I wanted to. I'll show you some stuff in QLab that I have variations of it that I didn't get to use in the play because story is first. It's not about the concert, and there just weren't opportunities to explore every little thing out of that. And he goes, I wrote you a melody. And he goes, dee da da dee da da da, which is the middle part of that melody. So that's the thing he began to sing in the beginning. That he brings it up. He brings that up to Eurydice in the very first scene. So I guess the window in was him conducting that piece of music.
Yeah, and the woman who played Orpheus was played by a man and a woman. The man spoke English and the woman signed, and Stephanie, who was signing, she just was conveying the music just so beautifully with her hands. It was just gorgeous, really beautiful.
Yeah, again, that sort of inclusiveness, so they're not, there's probably a different, I think we learned there's a billion ways to convey what music and sign language is, right? I think it's this, but she would do it in such a way that you would get that sort of legato longing quality about it.
And you would feel the emotion of the music as well.
Yeah.
Special. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's jump over into QLab. You can tell us a little bit more behind the scenes of Eurydice.
Cool. So again, it was all built out of that one thing. Oh, and another thing that we decided like to not open because the play was so theatrical, and so there were so many things we were going into, and I barely touched the surface in this session, but we didn't start it with a main theme, right? So we started it with water. I went through my entire library and found every single dripping water, river, lake, anything that had to do with water, every sort of kind of rain, and I threw it on a hard drive and I brought it into tech with me. So I would have that aspect. Water is a huge aspect. There was live water on stage. So again, another thing that I do is I don't try to just cue the show that you think you're going to cue, right? Give yourself a library of options to bring into the process. So I compiled all the water that I had, put it on my hard drive and put it on my desktop. And I knew I would need a lot of it later. So that way, time is of the essence when you're in tech. So it's like you have a director that asks you something. I don't like that river. Or do you have any kind of water dripping or something, whatever? I already have it. So a lot of that is you really kind of have to anticipate and kind of over design in a lot of ways and give yourselves options in tech so you move faster because, we have the pressure of time. So here's the Eurydice theme that I initially composed on a synthesizer at first. And this is what we teched with. This is what we rehearsed with. So we do a tech on Saturday and Sunday. We teched with this. And I recorded the cellist on a Monday, our dark day. And I replaced all the fake cellos with real ones by the Tuesday rehearsal. So. So that's what we rehearsed with Rob Campbell, who was the one that was conducting that. That's what we teched it with and things like that. And once we realized that was all good, which is another reason why we teched it, is like, is this what we want? And things like that. I made adjustments. I wrote out a cello chart and hired Robin, our cellist, and she played 5 different cello parts over herself to a click track. And this is her. So there's no comparison, right? There's the synthy version, and then there's, the real people. Oh, right. Another thing I do in tech or at the theater for rehearsals is that I give myself options. So if I just want to hear, let's say I recorded 5 parts for Robin playing those 5 parts, I will solo out each one, export them, and bring them all in QLab for a couple reasons. One is that I get to mix in the space, right? So in other words, we have 6 different speakers we have. I can assign different parts to different speakers, as opposed to I mix it a stereo mix and give it it's one file here. And all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, that's a little out of mix in this space. So I found that, again, giving myself options and soloing every single part. If I'm writing music and there's 6 tracks, I solo out each part. And if they all play at the start, if I fire them all at the same time, they will all sync up. But so many times, if I want to take out the melody and leave a space, that sort of crater for the actor to speak, or an underscoring scene, things like that. All of a sudden I have that right there. I don't have to say, okay, tomorrow I'll bring back a version of this without the melody, or I'll bring back a less busier version. I already have all the options in QLab. I can cut and add and double or triple, or I really simplify those options. So again, giving those up, because we have such a quick turnaround time. We have so many days until opening night, really. We have, I bring out all the options. This is the version of that. Listen to the cellos, just the middle voices themselves. Again, I didn't get a chance to find a place for that to be used, but I had that option, And then just real quickly, the way we ended the play, we can go into more other stuff, but the way we ended the play was that same theme done an octave lower. So you had all this drippiness of the underworld happening, right? And you had Orpheus, who just completely came through the elevator and he lost his memory. And this is the last thing you hear. Yeah, so there it is.
Wow, that really brings back that final scene.
Yeah, it was pretty heartbreaking, but yeah. I mean, I can go on with all this stuff, but we should open it up a little bit.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and open up some questions? Thank you, George. That was great. As for everyone, feel free to turn your cameras on if you like, or you can answer questions, throw some questions up in the chat. I see some familiar faces there. Hello, Kit Wilder. Hello, Lisa.
Hello. Hello.
Yes. Anyone, feel free. It doesn't have to be City Lights people. You're all welcome to turn your cameras on.
Okay, first thing, can you hear me, George?
Yes.
Be quiet, Kit. George, I'm working on a video project with a drone.
Yeah.
Listening to the Eurydice theme fits perfectly into the image that I have in my head. Would it be possible to? This is not for sale. This is not for sale. This is just to use as a background. To use your music.
Yeah, let me find a contract template and we'll talk.
Okay, that's all I'm asking. I'm just throwing it out there.
Send me an email. Okay, we'll talk.
We'll do.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. I had to get that out of my system. So, Kit, go ahead. You had something to say?
Hi, George.
Hey, dude. What's up?
I want to tell a story actually really quickly and embarrass you because, you've talked a lot this evening about collaboration and about responding to what happens in rehearsal and responding to directors. And I just want to let everybody know that sometimes you are the show. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody who knows us that I'm a huge fan and don't want to do a show without you because they don't happen without you. How many times in rehearsal have I talked to a cast or whatever and you're not even in rehearsal and we're working on a moment? It's like, don't worry about it. We'll have some George magic here. And I know that that's going to make it work. I remember some years ago, we were working on a production of Equus. And I just want to tell this story really quickly. You talk about collaboration, you talk about response. That was a case where actually the director, myself, responded more to you. If you remember, about a week into the rehearsal process, week and a half, you came to my house and played me the show. And I'm not kidding, everybody. He played me the entire show.
It was a complicated sequence of the show.
Well, it was the
complicated sequence.
For me, it turned into the entire show, and I will always be grateful for that because that sort of enabled me to sort of put everything together. So sometimes sometimes it happens where the music sort of comes first. I also remember you being in the very first rehearsal, you know, when we were working with the horses and whatnot, and you were coming up with things. Anybody who's a director out there, if you can have George in your rehearsal, your show is going to be really good.
Thank you. But that one, another one, the prologue.
Yeah, exactly.
So prologue, Frank, was that you knew you wanted it to be musically, rhythmically oriented, so I needed to be there to come up with it. And again, another thing that, like, if it's actor driven, you got to come up with it first.
Yeah, I love working sort of at the same time, not like me first and you second or what have you, but at the same time, and you're amazing at that. So I just wanted to praise you for that and embarrass you and say, hey, you know, anytime. That was a special thing, and sometimes you come up with it first, which was great.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And that goes for any designer too. You know, somebody shows off with it and be like, oh, I guess we're going in this direction now. In the greatest ways. Yeah.
So yeah, it was terrific. Yeah, there are so many stories about that one. I'll let other people talk, but there are too many to talk about.
George, you've got a few questions in there. Thank you very much again. Kit Wilder, one of our regular directors, playwrights, actors, everything. There are a few questions here in the chat. We have a question here from Roni Rahamim. What has been a show where you got to really experiment, whether it was new techniques or new technology?
Experiment, new techniques, new technology. Honestly, I'd have to really think about that. New techniques, new technology. Equus was one of the first shows where I gave myself a lot of options in tech. I brought in, because the sequence we were working on was very movement oriented, and the set changed, and there was a revolve, and then you got on an actor who was supposed to be the horse. That was one of the first shows, if not the first show, that I brought. I composed something with like 7 tracks, and I knew I wanted to have. I knew I wanted like 4 different steps to happen, or 6 different steps to happen, but I didn't know when. So I can't just sort of export it as a stereo track, and that's one way you can do it. You can have the actors adjust to music, but if you have options in tech, and I brought in every single bounce down exported track, and I layered it in together, and when the movement happened, then I said this happened, and then when this happened, then this happened, then this volume jump happens, and then this swell happens, and then this subwoofer thing happens. That was really the first one where I realized that if I give myself options in tech, then you can compose in the space.
Well, we sort of choreographed movement and sound together for that. Yeah. In that way, which was extraordinary.
Right. Yeah. And if I had made a choice, and if I had made a total, like, it has to be this concrete choice, or I didn't know the technology enough, everybody would have had to go to me, and it would have been a lesser product. But because I came with options, and I came, I was blown away by that. Like, if you bring in 7 tracks and you hit this thing called auto continue, then they all fire at the same time. Or they don't have to. You could take these 3 out and you have these other 2. And yet all the music is entirely synced up. That was one of the big ones for me. And I've done that ever since.
Very cool. Hello? We've got a question here. Just reminding folks, if you're not talking, if you could mute yourself, just so we're not hearing a lot of background noise, that would be great. Thank you very much. I have a question here from Carol in the chat. Do you write or produce music outside of theatrical sound design? This is a good one.
I'd like to. I went into that direction for a while. It takes because I'm working on 6 careers at once. It doesn't. It's kind of hard to like do that as well. I did have one short piece that sort of made it into this, discovery investigation channel, sort of crime TV kind of thing. But the good thing is that I own all my stuff, and I can sort of repurpose it for things like that if I decide to push that. But again, that's kind of an entire career, and it takes a lot of different energy to do that. So I will jump back into it at some point, because I have kind of a big library of stuff.
And you also perform with the band from time to time.
Right, when there's not a pandemic.
Right. Your twin brother is also a musician, I hear.
Yeah, but he's boring. Let's not talk about him.
Okay, we won't.
No, I'm kidding. No, yeah, I've been playing Greek music since I was 15, and that's a whole other Zoom talk. But it does influence what I do in the theater as well. So playing live music
Nice.
and creating music for the theater are related that way. Definitely.
Thank you. We have a question from Lisa Millette. In Eurydice, one of the biggest moments in the story is when Orpheus is singing at the gates of hell to get in. How did you do that?
Okay, I have that. Let's play it. Good call. Orpheus at gates, oh hell. Where's that? Here it is. So that was based on our theme, right? Right? And they just had, that was me singing, going in Eurydice, and then I added a whisper track to that. I went into the microphone, so it's sort of studio trick that you do. So I added Eurydice to sort of give you that ethereal, transparent quality. And then the sort of call and response, the response to that was me singing Eurydice in Greek, which is Eurydice, and that's sort of a call because it's rooted in Greek mythology. I thought we could throw in that little Easter egg that sort of climbs in and soars in on top. What I also did is I quadrupled the cello part. So I had Robin, our cellist, go da, 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 and I quadrupled it to make it sound like a small section. So I added then the whisper. Yeah, so that's just it's all based off of our actual theme that we built of Orpheus conducting for Eurydice, and it's just sort of, I wanted the sort of, what was the phrase? The IMAX version of that, right? I tell Lisa, like, so I'm thinking this big IMAX thing, like if we had all the tools, you have Robbie Campbell sort of flying in from the rafters, and then there's birds coming out of his mouth, as he sings Eurydice. And that's what I wanted to do. And like, we can't do all the other stuff, but we can certainly sound like it, So we added, with all the subwoofers and stuff, and I assigned this part of the cello over here and assigned this part of the cello over here. And I have all these, I took out all the big old synth stuff, but I have this underneath all that. So, we wanted to make it sound like the IMAX version. And then with Greek soaring over that. Yeah.
I just want to add to that, since we talked about having, Stephanie assigning the music in that moment, and that we wanted to make sure that any deaf or hard of hearing audiences would get that powerful moment, because it was so important. And so it was very last minute that we added actually another interpreter, Spencer, in another place, who wasn't signing music or singing. He was signing anguish and longing.
The emotion.
So, right. So that to me felt like that moment when we figured out that triangle of the the sound and Robbie pretending, you know, just opening up to sing, like with the birds coming out, and then Stephanie signing that he was singing, and then Spencer was signing the pain of calling her, and it was all happening at once. I'm like totally goosebumpy right now. Like I just remember feeling like the triangle of those things to give the audience that feeling, those emotions around that moment for that character. That was like one of the most powerful moments of collaboration in my directing career. I was just like, whoa. Yeah. And it took so many different pieces.
Yeah, and every day it got better and better. Like by Tuesday, we had the real cellos added to that. It was like, whoa, on top of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We've got another question here from Mr. Tom Goff. And
take off.
Yeah. Tom would like you to list all your Theater Bay Area sound design awards.
List? These are easily available and attainable on my website, Tom. I'm not going to say them. Okay, no. Amadeus, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Truce. That's the other way around. Amadeus, Truce, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Eurydice. Been nominated for a few others, but there you go.
Well deserved. Does anyone have other questions? I have one before we go, but if there are any other questions from folks, either say them or type them. I was just wondering, George, if you would give us a little taste of Truce, A Christmas Wish from the Great War, because you created these most amazing World War I soundscapes with planes and soldiers and stuff. Would you give us a taste of that? Because that was really, really cool.
Yeah. Let's see. It's only a taste, because I started going down, preparing for this, I started going down the rabbit hole that is my sound design hard drive. And I'm like, I don't have the final sessions that I did. They're all on a different computer, and I don't know what is where, and I couldn't tell you what happened after this scene.
Yeah, I'm sitting up because this was another show where the thing went to like 85, and then George comes along and plugs in his sound music, and it goes to like 120. So yeah, I'm sitting up. You betcha, baby.
Okay, this is another sort of... you know, in QLab, it's like you can do whatever you want. Ultimate, endless layering. It's awesome. This one, so this is a World War I ambience. This is something I either found or created and put down into a stereo track. And then all these other things are added on top of it. But really, it was probably way more complicated than this. I probably had a lot more things going on. Plane. So that was a couple of our war sequences, and I'm sure it was even more complicated than that. Another thing we had under dialogue there was this sort of, I called it a Marshall percussion loop. And this is a time, I don't know if you can hear me.
Michael, you're on.
What's that?
Michael, you're on.
Yeah. And then, yeah, we had sort of this percussion loop to talk about, sort of to underscore the exposition of what was going on in the war at that time. And then once it enhanced, I went to loop B, which subdivided even more. I went da 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 da, and it grew out of that. And then here it is, intensified. Yeah. So that was something that happened sort of to underscore and keep the play moving at the same time, which is, again, the story is always on top for that. And then we added a children's choir on top, which is somewhere I can find it, but yeah. That was that.
Michael, I got the feeling you were going to start saying some of your lines from Truce there. No. Okay, I think I saw one more question pop up in the chat here. Oh, okay. So Ronit and Max are two of our regular actors. And Max was in Truce. Yeah, and Ronit says, I remember the first time we got that plane flyover in tech, Caitlin and I both jumped because it felt so close and so real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was cool. You know, we got this, we started doing true surround sound with Amadeus. And we could have a plane start here and go right over your head and go right over your left shoulder, which is what we did in Truce. So having those options, I mean, it creates more hours of work, but it's so worth it when you can really immerse yourself in that kind of thing. So yeah, the plane, I remember it.
The plane. Any other questions from anyone? Kid, any more stories?
Regarding the plane, I remember when we were talking about the plane, and we wanted the plane early on between you know the two characters. He sees it coming and it flies over,
right.
And that's early on. And we wanted something later. And it's interesting, you know, we had to come up with two different planes, you know, because it's one of my things is World War I aviation. So the first plane had to be an earlier airplane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a 1914 airplane, which would have sounded very different from a 1917 or 1918 airplane, because we wanted the idea of where the war was going and how technology was advancing and whatnot. And sometimes it gets to that nitty gritty.
There are entire albums of World War I planes, World War II planes, and it's just about sitting through them. Which one do you want to get? Which one do you want to get? The first one I brought in was too fast. I went, and we're like, whoa. So we had to find a slower one.
Yeah, you can go to the Aviation Museum in San Carlos, and they have like CD after CD. You have all these like airplane sounds. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You should check it out next time you do a war show.
For those of you who don't know, Kit was the director of Truce, Christmas Wish from the Great War in 2014, and he also wrote the play with Jeff Bracco. So Kit knows a little something about World War I.
A little bit. I just read another book about it, and I don't know what my thing is, but there you go. I'm ready to go back and tinker with the script.
Do it.
So we'll have to do it again. All right, I'm going to shut up now, I promise.
Well, looks like we've got one more question in the chat, and then we'll wrap it up. Oh, Yvette Del Toro, who was in the play, said, I still remember those bells from the top of the show. That's nice.
Oh, the bells. Yeah. I mean, there's so much great ambiance that I love to just, one of my favorite things to do is like when you're there, because other designers will work with other designers around them, but I can't really work with a lot of things going on because I need the theater quiet. So I don't love being there late at night anymore, but sometimes I'm there when people are not there. Mm-hmm. And it's just creating that sound aspect. And I just go walk around it a little bit, and I put a bell here and the outdoor ambience here, and creating that soundscape is one of my favorite things to do, because it's like, you're a kid in a candy store and you're surrounded in darkness by the sound that you create. So yeah, church bells, one of my favorites.
George, you bring up a good point. As a director and actually as an audience member as well, I feel like sound puts you in the space deeper and faster than any other element.
Yeah.
And it also, just like when you were showing us your QLab sessions, I mean, I was swept back to language archives so quickly.
Ugh.
I feel like we retain the feel of sound and music in our bodies, either deeper or longer or something, because I just like everyone's saying, I remember those bells, that first time we heard the plane. I think there's just something about sound and music that
it puts you right there instantly.
Puts you right there.
And there are other people that say that the other artists in the industry that, in film that will tell you the same thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I know like the sense of smell does that for people too. You're like, oh, I remember that place that I used to go when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But
Right.
we don't really have the sense of smell.
Well, in Language Archive, we had
and we tried the bread.
we had to do the smell of bread.
Right.
I don't know if we actually did that, but I had to musicalize. What's the word I'm looking for? Musicologize the sound of bread, the smell of bread. Yeah, I just ding dong ding dong. Oh, bread. Here it is. I don't remember. Did we try a toaster backstage?
Yeah, we did. We even talked about like
And then it burned.
like aromatherapy or something, like a diffuser with a little vial of warm bread smell, and it just ended up not being practical. So thank goodness you write wonderful music, so we could hear the smell of bread.
I think it was a longing, short harp phrase that was just like, the smell of bread. Hey, man.
Is there a question about the cost that I'm seeing, Becky?
There's one more question here, and then I think we should probably wrap it up because we've been on for a while. I don't want to, overload people, although we're having fun. There is a question from someone named Steve who says, can you sell your music to other theaters that are doing these pieces but don't have such talented musicians as you? Oh.
No, but I will now. Can I? Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I haven't thought about it just because I'm so working on the next thing. Not one to always look back on that kind of thing, but it's possible, though. Why a theater company would want to exactly use the exact same soundtrack, it could be up to them. I mean, it's not impossible. I might have done that. I'm not even kidding. Somebody might have purchased my stuff for some kind of
Monta Vista High School, when they did Hamlet some years ago,
Right,
purchased
your
sound design for our Hamlet for Monta Vista High School because I directed Hamlet there and wanted your sound.
There it is. Right, all that creepy Ophelia speaking backwards stuff.
Yeah. Yep, all that stuff.
And
It's
great. Terminator 2 music where it's like, boom. I mean, not actual Terminator 2 music, but yeah. So I mean, it's possible. Yes, it is possible. That's the answer there.
There's also another one here about just what the average cost of a play might be. I'm seeing in the chat.
Oh, I must have missed that one. Average.
So, yeah.
Here it is from Tom. I'm curious, what is the average cost in terms of cast, director hours, and dollars to produce a single play?
That's from me, Jumana.
Hi, Jumana. Well, that's a good question for Lisa Millette, our executive artistic director.
Yeah, and this is probably not the answer you want to hear, but it really depends. It depends on the how big the cast is. It depends on what the set requirements are. It depends on the cost for the royalties from whoever is holding, the publishing house that's holding the rights to that piece. But I would say, just to give you kind of a general feel, I'd say it's between $30,000 and $40,000 to produce a play, and probably about 90 to 100 hours. That's an average.
Yeah, okay. That's why I put in average.
Yeah, and that would be not a musical. So that would be a straight play.
Okay.
And that would most likely be not using union actors. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And last question from Tom for George. Is there a show you are dying to do sound design for?
If there is, I can't think of it. I mean, there's probably, I mean, having done like over 50 or 60 shows, obviously the worlds are endless, but it's really the world that appeals to me. So if I can create a soundscape in 1920s Paris, that would be fun. It's really those kinds of the world that really appeal to me, as opposed to a play, and I just sort of let the play do the work, and then I'll go, I don't know. I mean, I'd rather create the world and like, oh, does this play have this? It's something that I haven't done. You know what I mean? A world that I haven't sort of created. Oh, Yvette says she wants the love sequence. All right, we can end on a teary note.
And on a teary note. Okay, Yvette Del Toro is one of our actors and our casting directors requesting play the love sequence from Language Archive. So we'll play us out with the Language Archive, George.
All right.
I love you.
Pasti.
Jag hävdar.
Ik hou van u.
Jag älskar dig.
Mer necklace alla.
Sagapo.
माझं तुझ्यावर प्रेम आहे.
Szeretlek.
Volim te.
Na minna vitisfini.
Niamazvi.
Aşağıda.
Saya sayang kamu.
Ben seni severim.
Esta är mio.
Jag skönderskär. Jag ser fram emot dig.
Jag älskar dig.
Volim te.
I love you.
Alaha auja vai?
ผมรักคุณ
Am chiarato, joku kamarada.
Te quiero.
Jeg elsker deg.
Amo tie.
Taimi.
Esakam.
사랑해. Tudua. Kocham cię.
Seni seviyorum.
Kesällä. Amot.
Te iubesc. Szeretlek.
Heppek.
There it is. And then we had at that time, didn't we have projections of I Love You in all different languages just show up, and it was the only projection of the show. I feel like it just put the whole. Hi Tom and Louisa. Hi. Yeah, it was like it was projected all throughout the whole set. That was like, oh, such a big moment there. Becky, thank you for this.
This is my pleasure. Lisa says so beautiful. Thank you. Lisa, were you getting a little choked up there? Yeah, Lisa was in that play. Beautiful, as you saw, gorgeous play. Thank you, George. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope that you'll come back and join us next week here on Zoom when we will have the Sisters of Silent Sky, actors Maria Gary Marquis and Jessica Whittemore, reuniting. They were sisters in Lauren Gunderson's play Silent Sky, and they'll be doing some scenes and monologues from that. So information at zltc.org/tickets.